Welcome everybody. Je m'appelle Cheryl Sim, je suis la directrice générale et commissaire à la Fondation PHI pour l'art contemporain. The talk is going to be in English, but to expedite the intro, I'm just going to do it all in French, okay? and then we'll move it on, get on with it. De la part de notre fondatrice Phoebe Greenberg, ça fait énormément du bien de vous voir tous ensemble. C'est la première fois qu'on fait une conférence comme ça depuis 2019. Donc, merci beaucoup pour votre présence. Je voudrais aussi reconnaître que la Fondation PHI est située sur les territoires non cédés. Tiohtià:ke, Montréal est historiquement connu comme un lieu de vie, de rencontre et d'échange pour de nombreuses Premières Nations, dont les peuples Kanien'kehá:ka, Huron-Wendat, Abenaki et Anishinaabe. En tant que colon de peuples, de parents immigrants, je respecte les liens continus avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir dans nos relations continues avec les peuples autochtones et autres au sein de la communauté montréalaise, et je vise à célébrer et protéger cette terre. On est ici pour célébrer l'ouverture de l'exposition Jouer Play qui ouvre demain soir la Fondation PHI avec une conversation entre Melissa Karmen Lee, la commissaire invitée de l'expo, et l'artiste Rirkrit Tiravanija. Melissa est née sur les territoires Musqueam, Squamish et Tsleil-Waututh à Vancouver. Détentrice d'un doctorat en études des arts de Lancaster University en Angleterre, elle est chercheuse en arts visuels et en littérature, commissaire, archiviste et conteuse avec des intérêts de recherche en art public et en engagement social, qui a collaboré avec plusieurs artistes sur des pratiques pédagogiques et relationnelles. De 2019 à 2022, elle a été directrice de l'éducation et des programmes publics à la Vancouver Art Gallery, fonction qu'elle a également occupée de 2016 à 2019 au Taekwon Center for Heritage and Art à Hong Kong, dont elle est également une membre fondatrice. Melissa est actuellement directrice générale du Musée canadien-chinois à Vancouver. Rirkrit est née à Buenos Aires, en Argentine. Elle a grandi en Thaïlande, en Éthiopie et au Canada, et a effectué ses études en art au Canada ainsi qu'aux États-Unis. Son travail défie toute catégorisation car sa pratique combine la fabrication d'objets, les performances publiques et privées, l'enseignement et d'autres formes de services publics et d'action sociale. En 2005, il remporte le prix Hugo Boss décerné par le musée Guggenheim, puis il reçoit le bénéfice du musée d'art contemporain de Naoshima au Japon et le Celia Artist Award du Smithsonian American Art Museum. Elle a exposé partout, tels que le MoMA, le Guggenheim, au Reina Sofia Museum, au LACMA ainsi que la Fondation Luma d'Arles. Rirkrit est professeur de l'École des Arts de l'Université Columbia et est membre fondateur et commissaire d'Utopia Station, un projet collectif d'artistes, d'historiens, historiennes de l'art et de commissaires d'exposition. Il est également cofondateur d'un projet éducatif et écologique connu sous le nom de The Land à Chiang Mai, en Thaïlande. Ce soir, ils vont parler de leur travail et l'expo à Fondation PHI et on aura l'opportunité de discuter tous ensemble lors d'une période de questions. Tonight, they'll talk about their work, we'll talk about our show, and then we'll have a chance to just all join in on the conversation together. Please give a warm welcome to Rirkrit and Melissa.
So maybe we can talk about who the people are in the picture.
Yeah, this is the room which was actually at that time in Switzerland. And I only know two people in the picture. One is the person on the keyboard, and that's Martin Klosterfelder, who at one point was kind of like an intern of mine. And he worked in New York, then he became an art gallerist in Berlin. And then the person playing the drum is an artist from Berlin. His name is Nader, who was a painter. And I'm not really sure what they're doing. I mean, they're playing, but I don't remember. I mean, we were at the opening and people were playing, so yeah.
Is this the rehearsal?
This is the rehearsal room, studio number 6. And rehearsal room number 6 is a room in New York in the East Village on Avenue A. And it was a room that, you know, if you played music, you can go and rent by the hour. And I used to go there with some other artist friends, and just to go and like basically just to jam and play in this room. And you know, I mean, of course, like already we talked a little bit about like the curry thing. So everyone always thinks I'm just cooking, but I'm actually
You were in a band.
yeah, but I'm also like making other works as well in other forms. So
I wasn't
This
even
is-
going to talk about the cooking thing.
oh, good.
So,
No, so that's kind of, you know, and that's also like as your question, you know, like, of course, when they kind of put you into a place, a book or whatever, school or space, you know, they put, you know, they only simplify things. So
and the cooking thing is not about cooking, right?
no, it definitely, even from the beginning, it wasn't about cooking. So it was really more about trying to make life around the object, right? So I was in the Art Institute of Chicago. I was at the school there, and I went to the museum, which is part of the school or took over the school. And there was a big kind of Asian collection and a lot of Thai artifacts in there, like a lot of Thai objects, a lot of Buddhas and pottery. And I kind of like was there looking at it and I thought, but these are all things that we use in our daily life, you see? Like, you know, even a Buddha sculpture, you know, is something we use. And we don't just sit them there to look at them as a object of certain kind of aesthetic value. We look at them as like a memory or idea of a certain philosophy or, you know, to remind us of how to live or think. And so I said, oh, well, and then, you know, I think this is what's missing from all these things here, or this kind of idea that, yeah, they are missing what's really important, which is the life around the thing, which is, you know. So in a way, and the kind of deduction from that was like, oh, I would just, you know, take the pottery out of the cases and use it again. So, you know, that's kind of literally what I did. And then when I made that, it was just kind of like, you know, breaking the things out and trying to put life around it. But then it's, you know, the first work was really just kind of people just stood around and looked at it.
Which was that work?
It's a work which has no, it's just empty parentheses.
Right.
So there's no title, it's just an empty parenthesis, and it's a pot of cooking curry that just, you know, was cooking through the whole show. And then I realized that it was still doing the same thing I was trying to get out of, right? And so the next work I said, okay, then I'm gonna have to cook and serve it to people.
There's certain kinds of behavior that people expect when they go into a museum, like the way that you, as you say, like you revere things. So even if you were, when you put something in the pot, people still, because it's in a museum, they want to stand around and in a way revere it. So in a way, it's like changing the behavior in the activation of the audience. It's difficult for people to do something different.
No, I mean, you know, it's different when you cook here, let's say, in a museum here, than it is to cook in a museum in northern Thailand.
Right.
So, like, you know, I had a show in Chiang Mai, which is like where I live, and I don't really make a lot of shows in Thailand, right? Because I feel like whatever I'm doing is already existing as life. But there was like, you know, some requests, like do a show, we want to see things. And so I did a show with a friend, and we shared this kind of retrospective show. He did everything that's on the wall, and I did everything that was on the floor. And so there's one big piece, which is a kind of it's called the Magnificent Seven. So it was like 7 pots of, a soup, this Thai coconut soup. And of course, like the opening, the door opens and everyone comes in, and all the people came. I mean, I'm not even sure, if they, and why or how, but everyone came and started to cook themselves. I mean, they just started to cook the thing. And I'm just standing there watching this, and of course I realized, I mean, for them, like to have this pot of things or fire, everyone would just start to like activate it without having to really think twice about it. Yeah. So it's very different. And I think that kind of reaction is probably different everywhere in context. Here, I think, now it's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to have a flame or fire or splattering oil, in the kind of now institutional structure. But I think when I was trying to do it was also kind of not just the audience, but it's really the institution to question, that distance of how, one looks at art or how one spends time with art.
Can I ask about the kind of Western, like Magnificent Seven and Spaghetti Western? It's like all these Western titles. Is it Arte Povera? Is it Country Western?
Yeah, it was, that particular work was being done in Italy, so it was referencing, of course, like the Italian film itself. But yeah, so always it's kind of has its own contextual reference.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up when you were talking about when you did the show in Chiang Mai, and you said that you don't often present work in Thailand because the work already exists and is part of people's life. And so I would like you to maybe expand a bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I was saying, to cook and make food and things like that and share it and to eat with other people. And we do that on a daily, kind of in a way, in a daily structure, right? And let's say like Thai, I mean, if anyone's been to Thailand, we live like, everybody's like a family. Even strangers are addressed, as like, you don't address strangers by their name, you address them like as if they were part of the family. And it's just a kind of cultural thing. So in that way, I felt like there was no need for me to try to make things to do that, to like repeat that in any way. I mean, I do different things, I'm in Thailand, right? And I think for me, it's just like, yeah, it's different there. The context is different. The reason to do things are different. So I would do something else rather than, yeah, I mean.
What kind of thing would you do?
Do you want to talk about the land?
Oh, well, I started an office with some younger artists, and we started a kind of magazine. And that was partly because I saw that these younger artists needed a kind of place to go, right? They were like finishing art school and they were talking about trying to find a way to continue to make art. And in a way, that was maybe like 30, 25 years ago. And they, for them it's like, oh, we should go into advertising, because that's a way to like still somehow make art, but, make also a living. And so I kind of sat there and heard this conversation, and so I said to them, well, why don't we make a magazine, and you guys can make the advertising, but make it like in an artful way, So we started that, and that became an office. And then after we produced maybe like 5, 6 magazines, everyone was like, but we need a space to show. And so I said, okay, we can use one of the wall in the office and put one work up. And when you put that work up, you have to explain why you want to put this work up here to whoever comes to see it. So I wanted to kind of make a platform where there would be more discussion and a kind of more purpose in terms of like really, making work or showing work. And then from that one wall, now we run a space, which has been now running for 20 years.
In Chiang Mai?
In Bangkok, actually.
That's Gallery Vert.
Gallery Vert. And Vert was like the name of the magazine. Vert is as a young, at that time, youth kind of slang for being over the top. So they drop the O and they just say Vert, right? And so it's like over the top, you know. And so now it's been a gallery, it's been running, and somehow I would call it like artist run for profit, right? Because like when you do a non-profit, you never, everybody struggles and the artist suffers. And so now it's a artist run for profit, and we've been able to survive enough to actually support a lot. So that's more like, I would say, so it becomes more like a platform. And in Chiang Mai, again, I went there and I started to live there. And a friend of mine who lives next door was saying, well, we should start a kind of artist retirement place. I've been talking with some friends and we want to have a place where the artists can go away. And then we had a discussion and I said, well, I have friends in the West who also want this kind of, retreat from all the shows and stuff. So let's do it together. And of course, because it's Thailand, you can go the next day and people are selling this plot of land because they can't use it anymore. So we bought it and we just built this kind of little farm place. And so, it's this kind of activity rather than making exhibition,
How many years, is the land now?
The land has been there since 1997. And it's there. It's some days there are more people, some days there's just, the grasshopper. So it's, and of course, but also at the same time, and we never made it as an art thing. It was just the land. It's like a rice field to grow things or to kind of, like I said, a retreat place. But of course, in a weird way, because my name is attached to it, and it's like really far away, so then it becomes like a weird mythical thing.
Art people go in pilgrimage to
So
go
people,
see it.
people go thinking they're gonna go, and I mean, you find something, but it's not what you think it would be. But it's always there, and everyone's welcome to go. So I would say it's to be in that other place, there are different ways of working. I mean, it's not like it doesn't have to be a visible exhibition. It's just it's making but differently, right? There's another question here.
Thanks for the talk and taking questions. So, given this format of reciprocity of the audience speaking to you as well as you responding to us, and then also your practice, I have two maybe observations and a question. Can you elaborate on the role of the artist more like a host than a ghost? Because despite the lowercase letters, you don't disappear, right? So much of it, from what I can gather, looking at your work in the past too, it's been about hospitality in a weird way, or in some ways. And then also, aside from falling out of context culturally, when you moved to New York, can you elaborate on which artists did you find yourself calibrating with in relation to being an author instead of an authority? I'm thinking about the generation that came before you, which were so heavy-handed, and then in particular feminist models of Sherry Levine and Louise Lawler, who kind of were thinking along the same ways. So we weren't there, so it'd be nice to hear where you found your community in some ways.
No, so I would say that since I didn't know a lot about art, somehow I had to study more. And when I was in Toronto at the Ontario College of Art, I met people like Michael Snow or General Idea. And I would say like a lot of Canadian artists were really interesting to me. And it's a kind of model, right? And then John Cage came to Toronto then, and we went and we did listened to him talk, and we did a performance with him. So like Flux's idea became very important, you know, like became quite important for me. And I think it's interesting that I look at it because of course Fluxus was also like a more kind of, I mean, it was an international movement, right? And also like a lot of artists from the East were also involved. So like Namjoon Paik or a lot of Japanese artists, Yoko Ono, right? And I think like, I would say like Fluxus would be kind of more of a beginning point in a way. And that was because, you know, they always wanted, I mean, their idea was like to make life and art closer, or to like merge the two really. Now, so when I was like the younger artist in New York, you know, people saw that, right? That relationship. So they asked me to appear in different Fluxus things. And then I realized like, you know, that even though they had this intention to kind of, in a way, reduce the hierarchy between art and life and to make it equal, the art always takes over. So like a matchbox, which is for like a game or a dice, you know, it gets thrown into a glass case. So it's the same thing, right? They put it into a pedestal and then put it into a kind of, like a certain kind of value is put onto that object because it had gone through some kind of, you know, time and space with art. And so I see that like a real problem, you know, and that was also part of the thinking behind, well, how to kind of work around away from that problem. And of course, at the same time, with that kind of question of authorship and question of authority, questions of all the institutional structures, which is of course assigning value or name or title or, you know, movement or whatever to this, is like something that a lot of artists that were older than me were like looking at. And of course they were doing it maybe even through like Duchamp, right, through Warhol. So all these things kind of merged together for me. Yeah, and it was important to also be, I mean, at that time there and to have all those things going on. Because of course it also added again to my feeling about how, you know, how to continue to make something, say, let's say after the ready-made. So I would say like the ready-made would have kind of, you know, in a way being like the end of the art object, should have been, right? And for me to like, let's say to reanimate the things from, you know, that had become object, to reanimate the object, I kind of said, well, the idea would be to like take the urinal, reinstall it back on the wall and piss into it, right? And I would say like the action then becomes the thing that could extend, you know, how we look at the object, right? So I would say, yeah, to be able to like come and make life, or to make, you know, and now it becomes as relational, to make social structure, or to make a kind of a little bit of a, let's say a little bit of, to like step over certain lines which maybe are confined to like the habits of, you know, museum going, or the habits of art viewing, or the habits of valuing those things could be overstepped, you know. And I would say like to make the decision to step over that line is probably really important. So for me, like it's always about trying to find a kind of condition, or a kind of a little slippage that would make one have to decide whether to not step over or to step over. And both decisions are relevant, you know, because you made a decision to where you would stand in that way.
Maybe that's kind of related to his second question. You were asking about host and hospitality as well.
Yeah, and I would say, like, you know, I would be a good host to be able to make people decide. To make a good condition for people to have to decide. You know, because it's not always, when I first made food or pad thai or whatever, it wasn't always like that everyone would jump in and eat. I mean, of course, there was still kind of a little bit of, how would you say, ambivalence, or like one wasn't sure really what was happening. And of course, I knew that people came to art opening, they expect to have, you know, drinks and maybe some food or things like that. So it's kind of like a weird place. So some people, of course, like, a lot of people who didn't think it was work thought, oh, this is just like catering for the show, you know. I mean, I walked down Broadway 10 years after the show, and someone came up to me and said, you know, I just realized yesterday that that pad thai thing I ate, you know, 10 years ago was a work of art, kind of, you know, like, so yes, but I like that kind of space where, you know, it takes time or it doesn't appear right away or.
So I'm here because I had a class in my art history class, and you were a topic, the Thai curry. And so I'm here because I learned about you academically. How does that feel to be taught in an academic setting?
I mean, I would say that, you know, the work that I've been doing or try to do is to try to not be discussed. Or let's say, like, I try very hard to, like, be, like, a little bit on the side of the thing. I mean, you know, so it's kind of like always a little bit difficult. Like, you know, they just made a kind of a survey show in New York at PS1. And you know, it's great. There's like, you know, 100 objects and 30, 40 years of work or something. And I feel a little bit like, oh, it's really hard to be the center of attention, you know. And so like a lot of work, like I did, like say the curry or cooking, and maybe if you see the shows here, you know, I'm trying really as much as I can to remove myself. Right, and in that removing of myself, I kind of try to find a way to then maybe prioritize the audience, right? Which is the kind of like making an interaction. So like, you know, even in this talk, I would like you to talk as much as I would or something, right? So to try to find a way to destabilize this kind of stage and audience thing. So yeah, it's always a little hard.
If we're going to continue the conversation, I guess, that's what I get from your work. I don't see you in it. They just slap on your name, but yeah. It's ephemeral. It's constantly, it's moving, you know, and I'm thinking of like the curry one. It's a conversation. It's like ongoing.
Yeah, I could say a little bit more also about this because of course, like for me, you know, I come from Thailand, right? And I was just saying, I came in 1979, just finished high school in Thailand. I have no idea about art. And I landed in June, in the middle of the summer in Ottawa, right? And I'm sitting in a little room and watching television and trying to figure out what am I doing here? And I would say that I think like the name is very important in the West, like this idea of putting a name on something or like to, you know, to have a authorship or to have some kind of, you know, subject or, you know, to be, yeah, it's a kind of idea of like understanding something through the name. And I actually don't agree with that, right? I live in a kind of more communal structure. I like to do things with other people, and I'm not so interested in really having you know, my name on the top of the thing. But I am working in this context. I started working here. I learned to make art here. And, you know, so of course I have to deal with that name up there, you know.
But in a way, it's helpful to change the context by you being in there, just because of your work is a de-emphasis on authorship. But at least in the textbook, they can understand that there are artists that want to de-emphasize authorship, if only it's changing the context in a little way.
Yeah. So like for the catalog at PS1, for example, I insisted that my name is written without a capital. And often like my subtitle of the title are always written in lowercase. And it's a kind of, you know, attempt to address this kind of not making a hierarchy, right, of the name. So it's like everything is in the lower case. It's not to be, you know, big R and whatever.
And there's a lot of collaboration in
Yeah.
your work with other artists too.
Yeah. And no, and I think the exhibition in New York is called A Lot of People, which somehow this became like a kind of element in how one would describe the work, right? Because it's a curry, but it's also a lot of people. You know, the curry is there because there are a lot of people eating it or participating in it. You know, so it's an attempt to try to shift things, but it's a, you know, it's not easy. Because I think, like, again, there is a, you know, structure which makes a hierarchy for something to be placed in a position and then to be studied and to be, you know, learned and to be a kind of idea. So, yeah.
Can I jump in just with a
Yes.
question for
Yes.
both of you? This decision or putting us in position to make decisions about participating or not participating seems really integral to the notions of play that come out of this show. I was wondering if, you know, both from the artist perspective and the curator perspective, if you could talk a little bit about that for this show.
I mean, I was thinking about it it was not just thinking about it in the one way, which was playful, but I was thinking of it as an enactment. So so like a lot of your work is the reenactment or the enactment of a previous work. It's even in sitcom Ghost, it's a play, it's a monologue. And so I think that there is an element of stage in the play that I was thinking about. There's playfulness, but it's also playfulness in the context of chance, I was thinking.
Yeah, and again, that goes really back to like Fluxus ideas, right? And play could be like, well, let's just say the idea of play or playing is like open to all of us. We all grew up playing at one point, you know? And so it's already like, we already understand that in terms of like instinctually. So when you see a ping pong table, you know, you pick up the paddle and you start to, you know, hit the ball over the net kind of thing. So I think that's for me, it's again, it's like, let's say like I cook because I know everybody eats 3 times a day. And because you eat 3 times a day, you know what you're doing. You know, it's not something you have to learn to do. So it appears to be something that you understand. But then maybe in the action or in the act of going through that, you might then suddenly step back and realize that, oh, it's not just that I'm eating something or having another meal or I'm enjoying food with other people, but there's maybe more to it than just that, right? But that could take some time, it could be immediate, so I think it's always kind of about like, you know, that one is playing in this kind of situation. And I think that, let's say the idea of play is a little bit more open to difference, let's say it's a bit more open to otherness, because one has to like let things go back and forth, and you have to accept like how the other plays,
It's also opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
It's creating these opportunities where one can do as you wish, or to think about it in a different context, or I guess to pick up the instrument and start to play in the work, or to enter the film and enact like the actor in the, it's up to you.
Yeah, and I think the other thing also was like always, like, I mean, me more, that there's always some kind of, let's say, reluctance, which is kind of like a little bit of fear. And the fear is like not to be embarrassed, the fear is not to make a mistake, the fear, there's so many of those anxieties we all have. And so play, the idea that it's actually like more playful would give you a little bit more space, to like enter into it.
Hello, thank you for this talk. I'm wondering if you talk a little bit more about Sitcom Ghost. I believe it's the first augmented reality work that you've done, but I'm also interested in like learning more about like of your very vast collection of works, why this one to transform in this medium, what you're hoping to achieve with the medium, and kind of like what this work means to you more specifically.
I'm very bad with dates and things like that, so many years ago,
I think 2005.
I was asked to do a survey show, and again, like a retrospective thing, and I realized like I couldn't really bring my work together, like one cooking piece next to another or like whatever, and I decided to just have like totally empty space, and empty space would be, the audience would be taken through the empty space by a docent, right, which is normally in a museum. And the docent would take you through to look at things, look at the works. But the works were not there, it was just words. So the docent would narrate to you what you were looking at and what the action was, what was happening. So the picture is really formed through the words of the docent. And, but parallel to this kind of tour, I had some ghosts appear in the space, and I asked a very good friend of mine to write a text for this ghost, which is the sitcom Ghost, and the artist is Philip Pareno, who's like a very close friend of mine. And I was just trying to find another voice which would maybe in some way could give people an idea about the work. And so he wrote this text, and it was performed by different young actors who came every day, and they would stand there and they would narrate this monologue to whoever. So like once you went through the tour, you could also like visit the ghost, and then there was another ghost which was inside the wall, which is like a sound piece. And I have been kind of interested to like reduce this idea of having objects always, right? And so I thought, and this is actually maybe the third work with AR. So part of, after having done that empty show, I've been sitting, since then with this idea of like, how could I make a work which doesn't exist? Which is just, just words or just, in the air. And of course, with the technology and AR, became quite interesting to like bring that into another form. I think it's also like the space itself also gave me a kind of feeling of like how I should bring this into the space. And basically, I wanted to make a work that doesn't exist as an object. This is probably the second ghost, really. The first ghost was done in Thailand, and it was in exhibition in like the old palace, which is a kind of museum. And in that context, the ghost came out of a mirror, old mirror from the palace. And the ghost was talking about like the idea of the name or the self, and talking. So that's kind of how it all came to this point.
We thought it was a good work because, it was Halloween yesterday as well.
But no, but really I want to, either to work with this kind of technology because it's possible to make something that doesn't exist, doesn't have to be, in the real realm of things, And then on the other hand, also, to also just use words to like, try to just produce the image or the world or something just with words, right? I hope, you see it and you tell me.
Thank you.
But I think, for me, again, like, it's not so much the technology is developing, and I think it's always interesting, of course, to find a way to make sense of it and to use it. So I'm talking to some students of mine about developing an AI that's lazy, right? An AI who doesn't want to learn, right? So, again, like to rethink a little bit like the function of the thing itself, why should why should the AI know everything? Why should it want to know everything or have every, So that's a kind of discussion, and we'll see maybe in the future with these students who are very advanced in technology and these kinds of ideas that, something comes out of it.
How much is teaching a part of your practice? You've taught at Columbia for over 20 years.
Yeah. Well, it's part of every day, so it's part of everything else. And of course, like in time, everyone is moving along. And I find it interesting because, of course, like 20 years ago, I couldn't talk to them about AI. And today, they know exactly what to do with it.
It's still unclear how it integrates into artistic practice, I think.
Yeah, I think if you can make a lazy AI, it would be something, again, like to a little bit rethink really the function of things.
I'm just thinking of, the big work in MoMA, the one that everyone stares at in the lobby that's made with AI, the colorful thing that's moving around.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
You haven't? People stare at it
but
like...
Philippe made an AI also.
Oh, really?
Which was in the lobby of MoMA.
Oh, maybe it's like really large and it's really colorful?
No, but I think artists are definitely going to use it or will use it in different ways. Like Philippe, he's using the AI to basically run, the environment, right? It's like turning on lights, turning off the lights, it's feeding the cuttlefish, it's, So it's a kind of another, like a kind of another brain that is running the program.
Right.
Or Ian Chang's, Bob is like a whole AI in the machine that is just growing or self-learning, but it's just a screen, it's on, it's in the machine. I think it's something to think about.
This work at PHI is, to me, really part of the dematerialization of your, it's all about dematerialization, like you say. So it makes sense as part of that practice of having nothing in the room. It's spectral. I don't know, there's something different about AI, to use like the brain or the computer brain in a different extension.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure, and it'll do bad things.
I have one more.
Okay.
You did a talk where you talked about the context was an art fair, and you said, and I'll never forget it, don't make art with a capital A. Can you talk about that?
Well, I don't make anything with capital anything. So,
That's right.
I mean, I'm trying to take the capital away from, yeah, I would say, I mean, again, for me, and maybe it's just coming from this other place, I don't feel like art needs to be, it doesn't need to be, for me, it's about, it should be in the daily life, right? So it doesn't need to be raised up too high and,
Well, all your works are untitled.
yeah, but I think I would like to, try it. Barely make any art.
Exactly.
I teach a class which is called, how to make nothing. So it's really trying very hard to rethink, let's say, making, right? And today I think we have to really rethink making because we have a lot of things being made which uses up a lot of energy and resources, right? And then after that we have to find a place to put them. And yeah, I used to say that, the museum is perfect place to put all the garbage in, to keep them there. But, it's we have to rethink like why we're doing all this stuff. What is
Right.
it for? Yeah.
I have two questions. The first one, when you are speaking about you're getting art and life closer, yet you're deciding to do that from within institutions and engage in institutions in comparison to other artists that are maybe working more outside of the institution. So I would like to hear about why and why you find that important and what's your decision in that. And then the second one, when we speak about making nothing and AI is something, and it has a huge space that it occupies in terms of the material that actually feeds it, runs it. And I'm sure that there's also a reason of why you're putting that in dialogue. So I would like to hear both those things. Thank you.
No, I was just putting the AI into dialogue because it's like now another tool. And I'm not particularly interested in using AI. That's why I'm saying, to make a lazy one. But that's always been a question that people ask about this institution or being inside. And I don't see it that way because I think I do things in other spaces and in other contexts which are not visible. I don't think I'm making art like I have to make art. So when I'm doing things outside, I don't sit around making it into art, right? So you only see things that are in the institution. I think the institution is, it needs to be always questioned in that sense. So one needs to be involved, right? And like even just to teach, I hate teaching, but I have to teach because I hate teaching, So it's about like being involved, and if I'm not, I realize like if I'm not sticking my foot in there, everyone's just gonna make the same thing, and there's no question, there's no doubt, there's no one to trip you and say, stop making that and think another way. So, in a way, that's not making art, but it's a part of like what I do. And I think somehow maybe it's like, it's the same, like as I was saying, one has to make a kind of line where you have to ask yourself why you want to either cross it or don't, And I think that's for me is like, it doesn't have to appear as art or inside or outside. I hope it's always, ongoing. And I think it's very hard to like say like like this question of being life and art, when you have to discuss it, it shouldn't be discussed. It's like it's just life, and that's something. So I think it's very important to be involved with many different layers of, let's say, this idea. So let's just say I really try not to define things, and I like to be involved because it's about questioning it, whatever that is that I can use, or I could use it, right? But I don't think it's the only thing. And I used to say like I would stop, if I know all the answers, right? And I still haven't stopped,
Avant de clore, je vais juste remercier tout le monde. Merci l'équipe de Pointe-à-Calière, merci les équipes de Centre PHI, de Studio PHI, de toute l'équipe de la Fondation qui ont travaillé extrêmement dur pour cette exposition. Je veux aussi remercier Yann Pfeiffer qui, peut-être pas ici, mais qui était avec nous pendant 2 semaines, qui travaille avec Rirkrit pour le montage. Merci beaucoup, Rirkrit. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks so much for, being so generous with us. Voilà. Merci à vous. You all complete the work of art. Bonne soirée. Good evening.
Thanks for asking all the questions. Thank you.
Thanks for making my job really easy.